We are so good at serving ourselves, and in the process we destroy not only other species, but the very environment that we depend on.
– 119 of the 178 some odd nations of the world are considered fragile states according to the UN, which means they are a hair away from collapse.
The truth is, we are only feeding nearly 8 billion people today by destroying our life-supporting ecosystems. We can't keep that up.
The capacity of land to support humans is diminishing all the time. It's diminishing in the nutrients that's in the soil. It's diminishing in the quality of air that we breathe. We're getting sicker and sicker. We're already experiencing the effects of going over our capacity.
We are following the trajectory of a detritivore organism that goes in and eats everything available to it until it's gone. Our population goes through the roof, we pollute our environment, and our population crashes.
Thousands of young people in Sweden and around the world, inspired by Greta Thunberg, walked out of classrooms today to demand politicians act on climate change.
For way too long, the politicians and the people in power have gotten away with not doing anything to fight the climate crisis. But we will make sure that they will not get away with it any longer.
In New York City for the United Nations Climate Action Summit. The eyes of the world will be on them. They have a chance to take leadership, to prove they actually hear us. Do you think they hear us? We will make them hear us.
Welcome, Greta Thunberg.
Independent economics organization looking at policy options has put out a new report that says the right approach can still make a big difference, and it concludes the right approach is carbon pricing.
A few weeks ago, I started seeing Greta Thunberg and I'm watching her videos. I got quite emotional because I thought she's doing something, but this is a different perspective and it makes sense.
Yeah,
and I think people have to, don't just get caught up in the media hype, because I got caught up in the media hype.
It's only a media hype. The people around the world, they're clapping on the hand, crying, "Oh Greta, we love you, and it's a great idea what you do," and but by themselves they don't do anything. They don't change their mind.
So the young girl, Greta Thunberg, who's being used as a catalyst to bring the attention of what they call climate change, which is really climate destruction. This young girl was told about the problems with climate change. She became worried and fixated and cares about what's happening to the planet, and she is frightened. So they're taking this and they're using this fear, and they're getting people upset enough about it without really thinking about what the real solutions are. The governments and the politicians are going to use this for carbon taxes and other taxes to try to control CO2. And like that's the only problem we have is CO2. That's just one problem.
My next guest on the show is a documentary filmmaker from Ireland. He says the Friday for Future movement won't solve a thing unless they focus on the overpopulation emergency first.
We will do everything in our power to stop this crisis from getting worse.
When I first heard about Greta Thunberg, like many people, I felt really inspired. But the reality is that unless the Friday for Future movement focuses on the overpopulation problem, then all of the efforts to battle climate change and environmental destruction are a huge waste of time. When we're adding over 100 million people to the planet every single year, no amount of consumption reduction or carbon taxes will ever be able to offset the demand that so many people place on the earth.
The future of humanity rests in the responsibility of each human being and as a collective.
Poisons in the air, in the ground, on the surface. Plants, animals, they are also poisoned. The changing must start in the thinking of the human being.
Every year we have about 100 million more people on this planet. Everyone needs housing, needs food, land must be developed, so more and more food is being grown. Every human being must be looked upon as a consumer of resources.
In this short time, 130 up to 150 years, is the extremist environmental changing during the last 500 million years.
Humankind should recognize that they are not the first ones who have developed on this planet. We destroy the fundament where we live on and are poisoning everything down. It's a saying that you're sitting on a branch and you are cutting the branch that you sit on. And actually that this is what's been done now.
If we don't stop this chain reaction
all kind of animals and all kind of plants will die out at the end. Not only the climate warming that we have as an issue, as a problem, we also have to face the destroying of all entities of nature.
Humans lost the contact to themselves inside. And so they lost the connection also to the nature.
The blackberries, like acidic, they love it. That's why they do so well here, because this was all these tall red pines. If we were logical, we would see that what we are doing is actually detrimental to our own health and the health of the planet. But we can't see logically. We don't want to see logically. We've been distracted and led to think that everything's okay.
I think often about what possible scenarios could be in the future when the system does come crashing down.
Things could just snowball in a very negative way that we just are not calculating, not taking into consideration the impact that we are actually having and how quickly it can unfold.
It's going to be hugely devastating. We're running out, yet we're still putting 100 million people on the planet every year, which are demanding more and more. So as our resources go down, our needs are going up, and it's just going to, we're racing towards the cliff. A more beautiful world? Sure, it's possible. But it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a quantum change in human beings' thinking and perspective and responsibility.
I saw things that were happening to our planet, and one of the things I understood from my studies is that the birds and the bees, the butterflies, are threatened. They don't have enough places to rest, to get nourishment. So I decided a solution would be to put in pollinator gardens to give the bees, butterflies, and birds a sanctuary. That's how this started. I think a lot of what's being created in our media is provoking knee-jerk reactions, and people are not stopping to think, what does this really mean? What does it really mean that we're in all these different countries with our military? What does it really mean that our resources are being strained? You know, what does it mean that our forests are disappearing? The Amazon rainforest, the forests on every continent, if they have forests, are disappearing, and that those are the lungs of the earth. What does that really mean?
They're down in Brazil right now just burning forests so they can raise more meat. The oceans are so polluted. I mean, we are poisoning our planet.
People have a hard time imagining that America could suffer some kind of breakdown. If we don't live within the carrying capacity of our planet, we are just going to create more problems than we solve.
It's a kind of free community
it has the goal to spread the information about the laws of nature and issues we have on our planet regarding the environmental problems.
We are also studying the functioning of our thinking and realizing that we have a psyche and that we have a consciousness and how all these processes are occurring.
It's a center in a community called FIGU.
I'm a member, an active core group member from FIGU. And FIGU means Free Interest Group Universal. We are located here on this part. This is in the eastern part of Switzerland, near Zurich.
The majority live around in the neighborhood. Me, as an example, I live around 7 kilometers far away. I only need 10 minutes by car to come to this place.
Within that community, there's a regular group of people that are based out of Switzerland. But then there's people throughout the world that come, a couple times a year or whatever to help out. And I put myself in that camp. I like to go over there. I've been there now 8 times myself, and it's just a joy to be there. It's the flora is amazing. The way they've planted everything and the way they take care of things are just, I've never seen something quite like that. The planning and the care.
When I came up here for the first time, I think it was in 1982. I came with my bicycle from Wheeler up here. It just had been developed here. Since then it has developed very, very greatly. I see the sense behind our group, everything that we are striving for. We have a special important task to be responsible for the well-being of the planet.
Our resources are running out very quickly. We've already gone peak oil. Now we're totally doing this exploitation with hydraulic fracking, which is just absolutely devastating to communities. The infrastructure and all the needs that are happening within our own countries are going into huge disrepair with all the encampments and homeless encampments and all the horrible state of affairs from the collapse, the economic collapse of 2008 and the one that's about to come.
Between climate destruction and things that are going on with the economy, any one of those things could create a situation of shortages. I think it's a perfect storm.
It's going to be a big whack in the face when the oil starts, the prices of gas goes up, the costs to heat the homes go up, your sewer systems are breaking down, water sources are totally polluted. We're already getting there. We're there now.
We're not prepared for a disastrous situation, even more disastrous than what we already are experiencing. What if you are totally dependent on medical equipment and the electricity goes out, or you're living in a high-rise and the elevator is stuck? We're so dependent on energy. This planet is ever increasing in terms of population, in terms of numbers. And if you see that everything needs its space, the flora, the fauna, to suppress the flora and the fauna is to suppress ourselves.
I think it's definitely prudent of every human being to consider the reality of the times we're living in and the fact that we do need to look at getting more self-sufficient. I guess you could say we're quasi off-grid. We have 16 solar panels giving us a total of about 4,000 watts of power each day, and that's enough to run a fridge and a washing machine.
Over this way, we've got a couple of apple trees that have been tough. This and this have managed to survive without any nutrients.
It is nice to know that we can grow our own food. If everything goes to the wall, we have these resources, and the knowledge is invaluable. That every year you're learning more and more and more, and that's priceless.
Another garden here. Catherine had the first year she made a small flower garden here, but we're going to.
We lived in Chicago as a child, and the pollution there was unbelievable. Mommy, why are all the fish dead? All these fish just floating in the water. So the pollution, and that was 1968. So it's been something I've been aware of pretty much my whole life, and it's just been getting worse and worse, of course, with the population growing exponentially.
It's obvious that the biggest problem is the overpopulation, overfishing, cutting down of forests, farming. There's so many problems, and if you look at them carefully, it all leads back to the unsustainable growth of the human population at the expense of the planet.
When we realized the reality of what was going on, we became very anxious about it, and I think a lot of people do. But then we went, well, what can we do about this so that we can adapt? Because that's what's important, is the ability to bounce back, be resilient. When services break down, trash isn't picked up, and things build up very quickly, but we didn't want to be in that situation. We moved to the suburbs of Denver. We decided that living this kind of lifestyle, not only was it very appealing to us, it's peaceful, it's more slower paced, but it also gave us redundancy. For heat, we are hooked to city electricity, but the redundancy we have is we have a wood stove. And so we can heat our house with wood. We have the type of wood stove you can also cook on the surface. And then we looked at, okay, what if the electricity goes out? So we have enough solar to power all of our needs once we put in the next phase. We already understood that our planet was overpopulated. And we started to realize how trapped we were in this system of constant growth. We can set an example to develop in a way that is more responsible and to control family sizes. It starts with each one of us. And so when we make those necessary changes within ourselves, in our thinking, in our actions, that creates an atmosphere and is encouraging to those around us, caring about other people, and not just, I've got mine, so I don't care if you have yours. We care that there's enough for everyone.
I think the biggest problem on the earth right now is overpopulation. The earth itself and its resources are being so tremendously taxed by just how many there are of us here.
Anyone who really takes a hard, rational look at the evidence, it's impossible for them to walk away believing that we aren't in the process of crippling our life-supporting ecosystems. It is so clear.
What's happening is as our numbers go up and our resources go down, in that gap lies so much suffering.
We are heading toward massive starvation if we don't dramatically both reduce our total consumption and pollution levels and reduce our total human numbers on the planet.
We want to just keep taking without putting back and understanding how to live with a lighter footprint, which is really challenging in a world that's set up in a capitalistic system to just take from the earth, make money, give it to the rich.
We have a finite land mass on this planet, and it's simple. You cannot have infinite growth.
It's hard for me to think of any major issue facing humanity in the world today that isn't being driven, made worse by human numbers and the overwhelming numbers of humans on the planet.
We try and should try to reduce our individual footprint. We have to also reduce how many feet there are making those footprints.
We're still adding about 84 million people to the planet net gain every year. Over 1 million new inhabitants walk the earth every week. Over 200,000 people a day.
Overpopulation is a noose around our neck.
You put a lobster in the pot, cold water, turn the heat up. It's alive. It's slowly, the water gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and eventually it dies and it gets cooked. If you take the water, you boil it first, then you throw the lobster in, it screams. We actually are indeed in the collapse. It's happening slow enough that we become accustomed to it and we think it's normal. So the water is up and it's going to boil, but we're in it and we don't know when all of a sudden it's going to boil us.
Things are changing just slowly enough that they don't really experience the pain. They don't recognize the pain. They're comparing how terrible the traffic was last year versus this year, not comparing this year versus 10 years ago.
People like to say, if you talk to them about overpopulation, they say, well, science, we can create the technology. It almost seems they think we can have as many people on the planet as we want.
Technology, at the end of the day, creates more pollution and also takes more resources to do all those things. We have to reduce our impact, and all technology does is take. Every phone we use, every piece of equipment we use takes minerals and resources out of our planet. And technology is not the solution, because for every problem it's trying to solve, it creates another problem.
If technology were so great, would the oceans still be dying? Would the coral reefs still be dying at a faster rate than they were last year or the year before? We've got to get out of the delusion that technology is well on its way to solving our resource depletion problems, and it's not at all.
Energy is only one part of it. I look at the environment as like the tines on a rake, and I think of energy as one of those tines. Water is one, wildlife is one, biocapacity is one. And we keep focusing on one at a time, thinking that's going to solve the rest of them. And they're really quite separate. They're quite separate. It's like saying, you know, oh, I've solved the problem of the roof, but now you need the walls, now you need the basement, you need the whole house, you need the whole earth to support life.
If the earth could talk, what would it say? If we pay attention, it's giving us all the signals. The messengers, I suppose, are the scientists of the world who almost a month or two don't go by without us getting a new report telling us what we're doing to this planet and to the other living inhabitants of the planet. We're in this slow motion homicide of planet Earth. So I think the Earth is telling us, hey, hold on a minute, you've overreached. How about putting an end to the binge? How about relaxing a little bit, taking it easy, living in harmony with nature? Why don't you give that a try for a while and see how much better life can be?
The problem is when you don't observe nature and you don't live in line with the natural processes, you create problems.
Biocapacity is a critically important term idea that every person needs to understand. Biocapacity is the term that's being used to represent all the land and water on the planet and other resources that are being used for human consumption. The research shows that the renewable land in the United States and resources can support probably no more than 100 to 150 million people. One of the flaws in the analysis that's being done on biocapacity is that when they talk about these numbers, they are not setting aside any land for wildlife, for other species at all, not a single bit. Up until 100 years ago or so, there was probably well over 50% of the land and water on the planet that was still being utilized by other species. And today that number is dwindling. In some places it's below 15% and headed toward 10%.
There's a lot of debate about how many people this planet can sustain. I've heard anywhere from 50 million to 1 or 2 billion. And it all depends upon at what point we would get down to there. So what's left? So if you say, oh, we just need to get down to 2 billion, that's assuming we still have not built over every square inch of arable soil. It's assuming we want no wildlife. But if we want wildlife and corridors and we want it to look like Yellowstone Park again, we're going to have to get down into the millions rather than the billions. Depends on what kind of goal you set. What we do know is that it's billions less than we have now.
When you sail and you're in a boat, if the boat gets a hole in it, you either patch up the hole and keep the boat floating, or the whole boat sinks. And right now, all of us are on one boat, all 7.8 billion of us, and our boat is sinking on many levels. It is sinking very rapidly right now, and we must collectively come together and not only stop the sinking, but restore the boat to viability.
Within nature, you don't find any species to grow infinitely. If we would be really responsible human beings as a whole, we would have just as many children that we can feed, that we can educate, that we can guarantee for them to have a good upbringing. There is just one kind of growth that's good, and this is in quality. If there's a growth on the quality level concerning a good life and to learn and to expand one's consciousness, then this steady growth, this is a good thing, but the rest in numbers, this is leading to destruction. Within our group, we have a simple rule to calculate the number that would be suitable for this planet, and this is 12 human beings per 1 square kilometer. And if we would have 500 million human beings, this enables that the most part of the planet is wild, is nature, and is undisturbed by human being. And nature would provide plenty of all the resources.
Probably sometime in the future, people will understand that the population is the cause of all existing problems nowadays.
Almost every bad news you hear in the media have caused by overpopulation. If you start to think about it, the quality of food, the climate change. We are just too many people on this earth, far too many people, so we destroy nature, we destroy life.
In my opinion, it's the underlying problem to all others. And as soon as that's corrected, everything else will fall into balance as well.
I've been an environmentalist my whole life, just had an affinity for wildlife. I kept seeing things getting worse and wondering why. And then I met the founder of World Population Balance.
I started World Population Balance in the early 1990s. I decided that it was critically important to start a new organization because I didn't see any existing organizations out there that were really telling the story to the extent and the ways in which I thought it needed to be told.
We can't ignore that our own field of overpopulation has a terrible racist history. It's very true that there are people who understood this issue, really blamed people of color for breeding too much and all kinds of awful narratives that have been around. I'm very concerned that the overpopulation movement is just too white, both in its membership and its leadership. There are some people of color who are involved in this movement, but it's dominated by white people, and I totally understand why that would be suspicious of any people of color saying, you know, why should I listen to you? I look at it as, can we walk and chew gum at the same time? Can we be anti-racist and an overpopulation activist at the same time? And we're going to have to be. How do you work on an issue like overpopulation?
It's absolutely necessary to talk clearly and precisely and directly. We are overpopulated, and that's the only way.
Overpopulation really became a sensitive subject, making it really challenging for a number of people to talk about it.
It's the people in power that are not talking about it, the people who are part of the corporate media world that are not talking about it.
No ruler in a so-called democracy would talk about overpopulation and would talk about birth control because they would know that they wouldn't be elected anymore because people wouldn't understand.
We're talking about world leaders, policymakers, journalists, and even environmental organizations.
Many of our leading environmental organizations in the United States and the world have abdicated their responsibility, their global ethical responsibility, moral responsibility, to incorporate messages about overpopulation.
These are all organizations that I believe are doing good work, and I think most of the things that they're trying to get accomplished, we should try to accomplish. Where I would fault them, though, is that they don't include a little bit of education about the population part of the problem. I'm not asking them to stop trying to preserve habitat, to stop trying to move us toward renewable energy, and those kind of things. I am just suggesting that they give us a more complete picture.
When they recognize that we are overpopulated, that will help save the snow leopard and the bald eagle and the trumpeter swan long term.
They will fail if they continue to ignore human overpopulation. If we don't get a handle on human overpopulation, we're never going to put an end to species extinction. We're never going to be able to conserve enough water to meet the needs. We're never going to be able to farm responsibly enough to solve the food problem if we don't solve the overpopulation problem.
We would rather have enough to be able to harvest, and we lose them to the deer. You know, they come in and eat. They come in and eat everything. But they got to eat something, you know. So one of our goals is, the reason we have as many fruit trees and as big a garden we have is because we share it also with our chickens. We use it as food for them, and we want the wildlife to have their share. One of the biggest producers of CO2 is agriculture. A lot of the things that we do now, like farming, that would be harmless to our planet, that are necessary, are now a part of what is endangering our planet because of the sheer number of people. Even those of us like us that are trying to grow our food without chemicals, without pesticides or herbicides, our food is not clean and pure anymore because it comes in through the air, it comes in through the water, and it pollutes our property. Permaculture people, that movement, they understand that we need to be able to produce food in such a way that we replenish the soils, we protect the ecosystem, we enhance the ecosystem that we're on, and we don't use destructive farming practices. The problem is they think that just sound farming practices is going to solve everything, but that can't be.
If you're a permaculture activist, I applaud your ability to look at the soil and try to regenerate it rather than pollute it. I applaud your ability to look for different varieties of grains and to try to sustain more and more people. I applaud your efforts, but don't be deluded by thinking that that's an upstream solution. It's still a downstream solution. And you can move upstream and not abandon your love of permaculture, but you have to marry the two philosophies together at some conjuncture. You haven't really gone off the growth model by saying you're going to treat the land better. That's certainly part of the story. It's certainly part of the story. It's like, I don't smoke, I vape. We're finding out that vaping is terrible and it's killing people. But it looks so much better, doesn't it? I think permaculture is the vaping answer to smoking. It really is, because it's not an answer at all. It looks better. I think the great marriage would be to have permaculturalists who understand the role of overpopulation and marry those two together.
There are a growing number of organizations that are communicating pretty candidly about the overpopulation issue. World Population Balance in the United States, Population Matters in the United Kingdom, Sustainable Population Australia, Sweden has the Overpopulation Project, but they're infinitesimally small compared to the big environmental organizations, unfortunately.
I did an experiment with World Population Balance in my own state of Minnesota, where we sent out a letter and said, hey, how would you like our help in creating a message that teaches your supporters how overpopulation issues is affecting the birds, is affecting clean water, etc. 74 organizations we found, and out of all of the letters we sent, we only got one response, and it was negative. And it said, overpopulation isn't an issue.
I find it despicable that leaders of any environmental organization at a national or international level especially still is kicking the ball down the road and pretending like it's not their problem or their issue. More than anything else, I would love to plead with you to stop abdicating from this mega issue on the planet, this core issue.
Even the United Nations on World Population Day is afraid to make that day about reducing our numbers. You look at their theme year after year, and they are beating around the bush. They are just overly political correct. They are cowards, and they're doing some good work, but boy, they could do so much better work if they would really communicate to the world honestly and openly about this urgent need that we've got an overpopulation crisis.
If you can convince people that the CO2 is the main problem and that we have to increase the taxes in order to decrease the CO2 pollution, the increasing of taxes won't bring help at all. It would only bring more money for the rulers. It would bring just more money for the economy and for the government, etc. And that's the main reason why rulers talk about the CO2, not because of wanting to have a better life or a better planet in the future.
The climate crisis is getting an awful lot of attention right now, and certainly we need to be addressing that. But I think it's distracting us at the same time. We're pumping rivers and aquifers dry. The industrial agriculture system is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, carbon emissions contributor because we are having to artificially restore nutrients to the soil because we're overworking it. We're creating these vast ocean dead zones. We're overfishing the seas. We've got fisheries collapse. We're toxifying the land, the air, and the water.
If you would find a solution regarding the carbon pollution, it would just be like in Germany have a saying that would be only ein kleiner Tropfen auf den heißen Stein, which means just a little drop of water of a very hot big stone.
It's very easy to walk out the door every day and participate in a world that is in denial of the overpopulation emergency. We need to recognize that every human being walking the planet is a walking carbon emitter. Choosing smaller families is the single biggest action that we can take to reduce our carbon footprint.
There's been some fascinating research done in the last few years with regard to an individual's impact. If a person did all of these things, upgraded light bulbs, recycled, hang dry their clothes, wash clothes in cold water, replace typical car with a hybrid, eat a plant-based diet, switch electric cars to car-free, buy green technology, avoid round-trip transatlantic flight, and live car-free, all these kinds of things. If they did all of those combined, they would save, in a year's time, 10 or 12 tons, right? If they chose instead to have one fewer children and did none of those things, they would save 58 tons of CO2 to the environment. And that would go on every year after that because they had not had that child.
It's actually been well documented that there have been instances where growth boosters have offered payment to scientists who would write papers that were not 100% honest. You're always going to have some profit motive behind some of the messages that we get and the news that we get that isn't honest about the crises being created by overshoot.
One of the major environmental organizations in the United States was given over $110 million by one very wealthy Wall Street donor with a couple of strings attached. And one of them was that this organization, this environmental organization, quit talking about U.S. population growth and the need to stop it.
The reason I think that they're so afraid is I think that they are afraid of losing their support. Because of course these are NGOs, they all need money. The best tool an individual has is their pocketbook and who they support. And I would really recommend you not support any environmental organization that doesn't take a leadership role in the overpopulation issue.
We're currently being encouraged by the growth boosters, the growth profiteers, to get busy conceiving and incubating more workers, more shoppers, more people, because they're really concerned about the fact that birth rates are coming down. The big corporations profit from continuing to burn fossil fuels. They profit from having more consumers buying more stuff. So they want a bigger market. They don't want a shrinking market, and they want a market of consumers who want stuff that they don't really need.
We are helping them be greedy with their numbers because we're going to buy their stuff. If you're going to dig a hole in the ground to get titanium out of it to sell cell phones, you know you're going to sell those in 10 minutes, right? Because there's so many people to buy them. So we have to realize that overpopulation has a role to play in all of the destruction we're seeing in the world right now.
Economy says we must have constant growth, more profit and profit.
I have realized during my life that I need less. I watched my mother go through this process as well. At the end of her life, she was downsizing while I'm doing it now. This is a process of getting there to watch the whole aspect. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you want to make as much and have as much as you can. And then by the time you've gathered, you realize it's not important. All it does is actually imprison you. You're imprisoned by your stuff.
The society we live in, it's very consumer-oriented, and we started to kind of go in that direction of more. We became disillusioned because here we are, we had the house, it was beautiful, 4,000 square foot. People would come in and say, wow, this is so beautiful, and you guys are very successful. We wanted to prove we could be successful. You know how that is. And we weren't happy. The advertising around us was always telling us we weren't enough. We needed to have more, impress our neighbors, have the best house, you know, have the most current clothing. And I realized a lot of that really isn't important. Going through a life of just consuming things, what's the meaning in that? That you just live and consume and then you die?
Corporations distort our decision-making in a couple of ways. Well, one is advertising. You know, they advertise to us. They give us status anxiety. They make us compare what we have to what our neighbors have, and think that the size of our house is a symbol of how successful we are, how smart we are.
We can't grow our way out of this problem, and that's what we are still doing.
A lot of this is driven by the mythology that we've all been programmed to buy into, which is that growth is necessary for prosperity.
It's possible that we can have a better world with less people and a more enlightened world. We have to have less children, and if we need to have less children, we have to have it. Yes, access is important, but the story is the most important thing. We are overpopulated. If smoking kills you, you have to stop smoking. If overpopulation is killing you, you have to stop overpopulating.
If everybody understood that, and tomorrow we all acted on that, and overnight we averaged one-child families around the world, by the end of this century, we would be back down under 3 billion people. We would be well on our way in the lifetimes of some people who might be watching this film toward a sustainable population. We don't have to get any government involved. We don't have to pass any laws. We have the power. If you are of an age where you're planning a family, you have complete control over whether or not you conceive children, you're in complete control over how many children you decide to have. We need gender equality. We need to empower women, because women tend to make smaller family-size decisions when they aren't being oppressed by men.
Birth control is something that people fear to talk about because they think it will affect their liberty. They don't understand what freedom means. They think doing anything they want to means freedom. But if you do something that affects other lives, or that affect in a negative way other lives, that's not freedom.
When people understand what a crisis is, they will start looking and having the dialogue that will come up with solutions.
The question is, so knowing what we know about the climate destruction that's happening to our planet, the poisoning of our air and our water, how do we control our population? And it must be done humanely. And I think when you talk about overpopulation, because of all the science fiction movies, they always show it as this evil scheme to control the population. People don't even stop and think. They have a knee jerk and they say, I should be able to have the right to have as many children as I want, without thinking about what that means to our planet if we don't control our family size. There's a lot of understanding that needs to happen, as we've seen in other countries like China, who have tried to control their population to one child, and then they, because of their thinking, a boy is desirable, so then the girls were killed. So there needs to be also an understanding that the sexes are of equal value. If people can look beyond that eugenics scenario and instead empower themselves, we can actually start taking that on ourselves to control our family sizes and educate women all over the world so that they understand that the value of being a woman isn't just about having children, and that it's okay not to have any children.
Would you like to talk about the solution to overpopulation in all its bluntness?
Wow, well, I think the solution immediately, given the dire state of the world that we're in right now, is that everybody just stop having children right away. Well, obviously, that's not going to happen. But at least for 7 years, just stop and let the planet breathe, and we will die off naturally. We're not, so many people jump to this knee-jerk reaction that we're talking about, calling people and, extermination camps. That is not the solution. The solution is to stop bringing more people into the world. Stop having children. However, we have religions working against that. We have the whole entire economic system is predicated on producing more consumers, and that's how, until that economic model is changed too, that's going to have it's going to be very dissuasive. And all the corporations are going to do everything they can to keep people propagating so they can have more consumers and make the money. So, the solution obviously is just to stop or at least diminish, and it would have to be a worldwide implemented thing. So it's not just one country, so we're not just targeting Africa or Asia or whatever. It's just everyone around the world needs to take self-responsibility. Each person has to become aware and more tuned in. It's a combination of having awareness in the very first place of my little part to play. And it's me. I have to take the responsibility, not my neighbor over there, not those guys in that country. It's me.
Overpopulation has been encouraged by our unwillingness to let go of religious dogma. If you believe that a religion can tell you how many children to have, you drank their Kool-Aid. They don't want you to have children for you. They want you to have children for them so they can tithe to their church, so they can have you in their wars. They don't care about you. And it has been so hard to fight against that dogma, the dogma that says we can't control our births because somehow God puts every fetus in the womb. If you think about that, if you read about that, you'd go, really? How can we, after the age of enlightenment and science, believe these sort of tooth fairy stories, I call them? We have to question all these stories and realize why they were put there. and they were put there to control people. I believe that father-based religions have been the source of great destruction on the planet, because if you're going to go somewhere else, if you're going to go to a heaven, then this doesn't matter. Just destroy it. You're going somewhere else. And it's a great tool for corporations to come in and destroy things and make money and say, well, don't worry about it because you're going somewhere else. Quit talking about things that aren't going to matter when our whole ship is sunken under the ocean. Focus on what matters, and what matters is a livable planet.
The term belief, it permeates our society and our language. I believe this, I believe that, but what does belief really mean?
Religion, organized religion, never made sense to me. It was just like, you know, if this God is all powerful and all loving, and if he's all loving, why is there a hell? If he's all powerful, why do we have to worship him? You know, it was just like, as a young kid, I used to sit there and think of that stuff.
You went to Catholic school.
Yeah, I went to 12 years of Catholic school, so.
I kind of dabbled in it when I was young a little bit. And then I went, no, this is nonsense. We had reached this point where, okay, we have material success, but it's not bringing us the happiness, you know? And so that's when I started really searching again, and Bill too.
Oh, now you're folding your hands like you're in church.
Oh, I am.
Oh, are you? Is this your church?
This is it. Don't get any holier than this.
I started searching. I looked through different religions. I revisited, because even though I pretty much suspected there wasn't a God, I just didn't feel that. I would meditate, or I would even try prayer, but I wouldn't get anything back. It always was from in here. And so I thought, you know, I just don't feel like there's anything out there answering me the way we're taught. And so I decided, well, religion doesn't hold the answers to me, because every religion I looked at, not only did they want you to pray and worship a higher source, which made me uncomfortable, but they subjugate women. Every religion I looked at, I thought, how can this be the answer if women are less than? So then I decided to explore the New Age world, and I had been there before and had left it behind and thought, well, I'll give it another shot, because I feel confused and I am looking for answers. So I was looking outside of myself again, and I went into this world of people that talk about their angel guides and their channeling and all these very confused modes of belief. And there were so many books written on it, and I wasn't trusting myself. That initial knee-jerk reaction you get when you go, that's not true. I was ignoring that. I was believing. Luckily, I kept exploring it. I kept going to different people, and I would write down what they would say to me, and I would start to see the contradictions in their answers. How could that be real? So, you know, you start thinking in that way, and I thought, okay, am I looking for a Band-Aid, someone to make me feel better and tell me everything's okay? Or am I looking for the truth? I had lost my self-confidence since the answers were inside me. In exploring this world, I didn't feel like I was becoming clear. I just felt more confused, more lost. And I think there's a lot of people that go down this road, and I think religion often causes the same problem, because they're different sides of the same coin, really. One, a lot of people leave religion or reject it the way I did because it's so rigid and the way they treat women. All your wishes can come true if you just do this or think this. It's magic. It's not governed by the laws of cause and effect. It's more magical thinking. And so people get lost in that for their whole lives.
People have beliefs that they identify with, and they become attached. That becomes part of who they are, these beliefs. And so they see their life through their beliefs.
I think religion is one of the huge problems that's splitting people into us against them groups all over the world.
People are limited in their thinking because of their belief systems, and that's also the reason why they can be manipulated very, very greatly.
In nature, the strong protect the weak. But with humans, people may want you to think in a particular direction for their own profit or for their own power over you. But that's why it's important to be able to think for yourself. If you can't think for yourself, then you're going to be influenced by all of these different things. We're still being influenced, but at least we can try to test it and see if it makes sense for us and adjust.
Religion has been a doctrine, pretty much all of them are doctrines that keep people looking outside of themselves for truth. By looking outside of themselves, they become dependent, and that creates a form of consciousness enslavement. Idolization is a huge thing too, which is all part of, it comes out of religion, but now it's into our sports stars and who we're identifying with. All this stuff, this is a vulnerability. This is keeping people distracted, and that is a huge weakness. That's culture, that's consumerism, that's corporate interests, it's the whole ball of wax.
We tend to be told to accept it as being true, rather than question whether there is truth to it and logic.
Knowledge is based on reality. What is one fact built upon another that brings one to conclusions that are fact-based, science-based, versus belief, which is a mental construct that is told to you from somebody else, or based on stories that have been read to you over and over and over, or that are part of your culture that are just taken as knowledge, but they're not necessarily knowledge until one actually starts to question and look into it. Then you find what is knowledge and what is not.
People tend to do this just believing something because it's the laziest, most comfortable way, just believing, not using his or her thoughts and feelings in order to figure out whether or not something can be true or not. The easy way is not always the good way. And just believing something means that they become delusional in a way that they see life and everything not in the real way. Knowledge, at the other side, means that you have to use your brain. You have to think about everything in a more critical way, that you try to figure out whether or not something is true or not.
There is a huge danger on this planet because so many people are not basing their life on facts.
If you hear something and you think, oh, I hear this, I must think about to discover if it's possible or not. And after this procedure, you know.
The less we exercise that muscle of our own intellect in solving problems, the weaker that muscle becomes, and the more dependent we become on the answers other people seem to have for us.
Freedom has to be a freedom of thinking, a freedom of being able to see beyond our limits. You have to be able to have the freedom to ask the questions But if you're told that this is what it is, and you just have to accept it, then there's no possibility for exploring what the nature of reality is. Hence the self-imposed dampening of one's curiosity.
A true teacher is just giving information about what's real, only this, and is not demanding any belief. It does not try to convince anybody.
A true teacher only gives you the amount of information that you need for yourself, that you can work with, that you can gain your own knowledge. So a true teacher doesn't give you more information that you really need.
If you believe, you don't think. If you are searching for knowledge, you must think. You must think for the way to find the knowledge.
You're presented with a story and a set of rules, and you're taught, just believe this. And if you don't believe it, one of the things they've done to human beings through religion is, if you don't believe what I believe, I'm going to shun you, I may kill you, I may imprison you, or I'll punish you because you need to think the way we think.
You're not allowed to think for yourself. You have to take the dogma and you have to accept it.
Giving up control to something outside ourselves.
It permeates all areas of your life. The social structures, the family dynamics. Even though people may not be religious, that effect is still there. And with so many people practicing that, the ones that even question it, they don't have a foothold.
Based on this religious thinking, people have no long-term perspective. They think, oh, after I'm dead, I'm going to heaven, and that all the problems are solved. I don't care about the other people, the other generations.
Children are really good at seeing things as they are. And what happens to us along the way is we're taught, that we have to beg and then just wait passively for the answer to come from another source.
We're told this is how it is, and it's a brainwashing on a very vulnerable, undeveloped person. Every human being should be able to grow in a neutral fashion and not be told, indoctrinated, brainwashed. That's not right. We should be able to grow up and inform ourselves.
We're teaching our children to believe something that isn't true. People have a hard time looking at things like overpopulation. Because religion stops the process of growing from a child to an adult, they aren't adults in their reactions to things. And when we truly become mature and become an adult, we are able to have the courage and the maturity to look at a situation and say, how can I solve this?
People don't do the work to gain and collect real knowledge. The overpopulation itself is only the effect of the false believing of people, of the thoughts and feelings the people have that are not related to the reality. The main problem, the real main problem is here.
First, you have to be able to observe. You have to be able to see clearly.
When we are no longer believing something, we're able to see reality.